Hello everyone. In the last lecture we discussed about the institutionalism, which is a part of our public policy theory. Okay. So today we will be discussing rational choice theory as well as the system theory. Okay, system theory and also the process model. Okay. So these are the outline of this lecture. Although we have already discussed what is rational choice and behavioralism in the context of institutionalism theory, but here we will be highlighting what exactly is this rational choice theory. Okay. So given this understanding that all these theories that we are discussing, so they are shaping the public policy theories. So that is the reason they public policy, and that is the reason all these theories are called the public policy theory. Okay. So what is this rational choice theory? Rational choice theories emphasize that individual must anticipate all the outcomes of alternative courses of actions and calculate what would be the results, and they can, out of all these results from the alternatives, so they can identify or choose the best among them. Okay. So that is the assumption of rational choice. Okay. And so in this case, in the rational choice theory, since we are taking rationality on the part of individuals or largely the consumers, they choose the alternative and all these alternatives are available to them, right? And they choose those alternatives out of all the alternatives available to them. They choose which is giving the greatest satisfaction. Okay. So that is what is the assumption behind this rational choice theory lies. And let us say that if there is any kind of uncertainty involved, right, so that means there are alternatives and there the consumers or the individuals, they are anticipating outcomes, but however there involves a greater amount of uncertainty in getting the outcomes. Okay. So in that case, generally what is done in a particular theory or model, that more assumptions are made in addition to the rational preferences. Okay. So rationality can also mean the decision maker always chooses the most preferred or best option, and but however this choosing the best preferred option may not be true in the real world. Okay. So for example, we can go back to this theory of rational consumer choice theory that is very popular in microeconomics. So what is the assumption? The theory of the rational consumer choice, it assumes that individuals perfectly optimize their utility, okay, from different alternatives. Let us say the individual or the consumer is given alternatives of A1, A2 and A3. Let us say there are 3 alternatives. Okay. So based on the assumption of rational consumer choice or individual choice, so the assumption is that individuals perfectly optimize their utility by having complete information, right? So they can get the optimal decision based on some of the parameters. The first one is that, or some of the assumptions again. First one is that there should be complete information available to this individual so far the alternatives are concerned. Okay. And again the individual should be in a position to have to calculate. That means the individual should have infinite kind of calculative capacity, so that for every alternative the individual can evaluate the benefits and cost and take a decision that which is better in comparison to what. Okay. And moreover the individual will be taking a decision which will be fulfilling, the choice would be consistent and the individual would be taking the decisions accordingly. But in real life situation, as I told you that real life situation in the true world, these assumptions may not hold good. So in reality these assumptions can fail because of what? Because of our cognitive burden, because here we, as we discussed, that the individual will be having infinite computational capacity, right? But in the real world what would be happening, that these assumptions may fail because of our limited cognitive capacity and sometimes external bias or emotional influences also. So because of all these factors, the decisions that is reached by this individual or the consumer may not be optimal, rather a suboptimal decision would be reached. Okay. So some of the popular examples that we can take from, again referring to microeconomic economics paper, that The examples could be the bounded rationality, right. So, what is this bounded rationality? So, that means by making choices, right, that are good enough, by making choices that are good enough rather than finding mathematically perfect choice. Okay. So, instead of finding a choice which is mathematically perfect, the individual may choose which are just good enough. Okay. So, that is called what is known as bounded rationality. So, as individuals do not have infinite time and also the mental capacity is limited. So, it is very difficult to judge, to weigh every alternative available to him. So, instead of optimizing the outcomes from alternatives, the individual may rely on bounded rationality, that is by making choices that are good enough rather than to find which is mathematically perfect. Okay. And in this example of bounded rationality, we can find some other concept like heuristics, right. So, what is that? That many times we are finding that in real world, just to save time and energy, individuals frequently use mental shortcuts to reach a decision, right, rather than going a detailed research and doing analysis of all the alternatives. The individuals generally take mental shortcuts, or which is known as heuristics. Okay. So, that means this is the real, what you can say, real world challenge. Okay. So, since we are finding some real world challenges like this, so we need to simplify our calculation, right, in this case. So, to simplify the calculation and again to make a prediction, okay, some rather unrealistic assumptions are made about the real world. Okay. So, what are those unrealistic assumptions that we make as a part of our rational choice theory? So, this unrealistic assumption can include that an individual has precise information which may not be holding true in real world, right, or asymmetry of information is very much pronounced in the real world. So, but however, the assumptions that we are taking is that individual has precise information about exactly what will occur under any choice made for alternatives. Okay. And the second assumption, which is again unrealistic, is individual has time and ability to weigh every choice against the other choice, which is also not very much possible in real world all the time. And the third could be that an individual is fully aware of all the possible choices, so which is also may not true in real world. Okay. So, given this understanding of this rational choice, now we can find that there are many limitations and criticisms. Okay. So, for example, I told you heuristics, bounded rationality, asymmetry of information. So, because of these, we need to be extra careful in formulating our public policies. So, these are some of the guiding factors or theoretical underpinnings or the theoretical frameworks that we can take in framing and analyzing the public policy as well. Okay. So, now we can move to the next theory, that is system theory and process model. Okay. First of all, let us understand what is system theory, then we will be discussing the process model, because process model more or less we have already discussed in the other earlier classes in week 1. So, the first thing that we need to understand in system theory, that who are involved in this theory. Okay. So, there could be involvement of individuals, groups or nations depending upon what exactly we are doing and what is the scope of our problem. And the second question that is also asked to understand the system theory is how is it possible. Okay. So, that means how is related to the environment which may stimulate inputs into the political system, and that is the reason we can find outputs and also feedbacks. Okay. So, it is a kind of input output system. Okay. So, we are getting inputs into the political system, and as a result we are getting outputs and followed by the feedback. This is how we are finding, that is the reason the question is how. Then what is the implications of this system theory? So, the implication is that the system implies a very identifiable set of institutions and activities in the society, and that functions to transform the demand into decisions, right. So, there are set of institutions right, or activities in the society, okay, they function, right. As a result, they try to their function transform the demands into decisions, authoritative decisions, and that requires the support of the whole society for implementation purposes. Okay. So, this implies that the system theory, from this implication we can find that the elements of the systems are interrelated. So, that is the reason we are finding a set of institutions and there are activities in the society. So, they function. So, institutions and society are related. Okay. Again, we are finding that when they functions, the demand converts into authoritative decisions, right. So, again we have to take into account these elements, right, in the system. Okay. So, that is the reason we can find in the system theory, we can find the elements of the system which are interrelated. That is the reason we are finding from inputs we are getting outputs and the feedback. And the second one is the system can respond to the forces that is in the environment itself, okay, in that particular system environment. Okay. And that it will also respond to forces to preserve itself, preserve the system itself. The system may be in terms of institutions or maybe in terms of functions or activities of a particular society. So, for these three purposes, okay, we can find that the systems theory would be continuing. Okay. So, this is just a snippet understanding of what is the system theory, and let us understand in detail what exactly is the system theory. The system theory is propounded by David Easton, right. So, he is a Canadian born political scientist, okay, and as per the system theory, public policy may be viewed as a political system response. So, public policy is the outcome of political system response, right. How is it happening? The political system responding to the demands, okay, and these demands are arising from the environment itself. So, the public policy may be viewed as a political system response to demands arising from the environment itself. Okay. And if you see what is this political system, the political system comprises of some institutions, identifiable and interrelated institutions, and some activities as well, right. Let us say the activity of the government, the governmental institutions or the political processes in a society, and that those activities and those institutions make authoritative allocations of values or decisions, and eventually they are binding for the members of the society. Okay. So, the political system is treated as a subsystem here, because we are thinking about an environment, and the environment consists of all the phenomenon, right. So, in the environment there are different systems also, and the political system is a subsystem. The other systems are the social system, economic system, the biological setting systems, okay, and however these are external to the boundary of the political system, okay, but of course, this political system is in the environment itself. Okay. So, analytically we can find that we can separate the political system from the other components of the society, like your social system or economic system. Okay. So, the question is that even though we have an environment, and in the environment there are different systems and subsystems as we identify, then what is the speciality of this political system? Okay. So, and that is the reason Easton has taken this, emphasized this and propounded his theory of system theory. Okay. So, in this system, when we emphasize that authoritative allocations of values are made and decisions are becoming involuntary for all or binding for all, right. So, the purpose of the political system is to convert the inputs into outputs. So, what are the inputs? Inputs are in terms of demand or in terms of support. So, it gets converted into decisions or outputs. Okay. And if you see the boundary of the system in fact determines what is a system and what is not a system. So, it decides that which one or which element should be inside the system and which should be outside. Okay. That is which and what actions are political and which and what actions are not political. Okay. So, given this understanding, now we can find a graphical presentation of the system of political actions. As I told you that this is the environment. So, in the environment we are finding the inputs are in terms of demands and supports, okay. It's gets converted through this political system, and as a result we are finding the outputs in terms of decisions, or outputs are in terms of policies, okay. So, the rest are the environment. Again, when decisions and policies are made, then of course there would be criticism, there would be some feedbacks, okay, or there would be some supplements. So, these are in terms of feedback. Again, these feedbacks are provided in terms of demands or support, okay. So, this is how the system of political action takes place, which requires broadly two important thing. The first one is input and second one is output, okay. So, what is this the component of inputs? The component of inputs are demand and support. It can be in terms of political opinion, communication to elected officials, okay. And the second one is the political system. So, that means here the input gets processed through this, right, in order to get the outputs, okay. So, this political system is a process, or we can say the political system, and largely it is thought, it is compared as a black box, because how the demands are converted into decisions, many times it is, this process is really blurred. So, in the process, in this particular sections, this process translates inputs into politics, policy making, or values or skills, and the personalities as well, okay. So, the last component of the system of political action is the outputs, that is in terms of decisions and policies. So, what are the components of these decisions and policy? It can be in terms of laws, it can be in terms of programs, projects or plans, policies and regulations, okay. So, finally, we have what? This one, that is feedback, that if there is at all any feedback or any comment, criticism or any new points or any supplements that is identified, so they consist of what is feedback. So, feedback can be in terms of news, societal media and also interaction. So, all these are again incorporated in terms of inputs. So, continuing with this system, the system of political actions. So, we can find that the very features we can identify from this input, process and output, or input, political system and output. So, we can find that this system model is very goal directed. So, or we can say goal directedness feature of this system model. So, that means systems are really goal oriented and they engage in feedback in order to meet the goals of the organizations, that is your output, okay. And again, when you see that this is the structure, this is the component of our system model, then it gives a very holistic view, because this theory focuses on the arrangements and the relations between different parts, right, different parts, and that connect into the whole in order to find out what is the final output, okay. And so, here we can think about the theoretical aspects of political models. So, David Easton has contributed 3 key volumes to the understanding of political models, the theoretical aspects of the understanding of the political models, okay. The first one was published in 53, the political system and inquiry into the states of political science, and the second 65, and the last one, which is very important, that we are discussing, a systems analysis of political life, published in 65, okay. So, based on this information, now we can identify that what are the features or characteristics of the system model, okay. The first thing, so if you can just go back to your graph, right, the pictorial form of the system model. So, the first thing that we can identify, that there is a system. What is a system? That it involves a set of interrelated parts, right, that translates inputs into outputs through this black box of political action, that is your processing, okay. And the second characteristic is that there is subsystem as well, because that through this subsystem the processing is done. And there we can also identify the super system, that means there are other systems in the environment like our social system or society or economic systems, and also there are boundaries. And what are the boundaries that separate the system from their environment? Okay, and in this case we can at least identify 4 different types of boundaries. The first could be the physical boundary, that means the security system that can prevent the access from one boundary to another boundary, that is the physical boundary. The second one is the linguistic boundary, that means through specialized language only there could be interactions in a particular system. And the third one is systematic boundary, that means there are definite rules that can regulate the interaction in the systems. And the last one is psychological boundaries. So it depends that what is the psychological processes, right, or psychological state of the members of the society in that particular system. Okay, so given this understanding, now we can think about that what are the limitations and criticisms of Easton system model. So if you analyze, then you can find that his analysis of a system is very general. That means now we can think about this input, process and output, okay, or input output. So there are different theories applicable in different contexts as well. Okay, so input output model by Leontief, right, to understand the interdependence of industries and sectors, or you can think about the other one, the input, process and output. Nowadays we are emphasizing on this computational abilities or computers and the machines. So there we are using this input, process and outputs. So in this context, when he propounds this theory, and by identifying the systems, that is inputs, process and outputs, right, so he claims that he is creating a general theory, right, but he has not really succeeded in describing this middle one, that is process, okay, defining the political system. Because many a times many thinkers, they believe that this political system is like black black box view of politics, that many thing is not known, or many thing is not revealed, that what has happened in that process. Okay, and the second could be that it is not very clear that how this, again it is related, how this conversions inside the box operates, so that the inputs is translated into outputs. Okay, so what are the processes that is converting this inputs to outputs. Okay, and further criticism can be based on the assumptions, that he assumes that the politics is very ordered and complete, but in real life politics may not be very ordered, and there is uh, nothing that the politics is complete. Rather, politics nowadays, if you see, that it is dynamic, it can be impacted by many external factors as well. So again, this Easton's theory is being criticized for its too mechanical nature and too western nature, and many scholars are arguing that this kind of theory applies to very advanced, very stable democracy, or very matured democracy, rather than any democracy. Okay, so that is the reason the claim that a creation of general theory is propounded, so it is giving a wrong notion. And again, the other criticism can be on the ground of that it is not very focused on specific targets, right, and it does not reflect the impact of interpersonal relationship on productivity, because we are finding there are different subsystems as well. So members would be also different, and they would be having their interpersonal relationship as well, but it does not reflect the impact of this interpersonal relationship on the productivity. Okay, but now would be wondering about that, given the very structure and elements of this model and also the criticisms of the model, what could be the applications of the model? Is there any application of this model? So this theory is used to measure performances and control, and also compute interactions as well. So So, these are the applications. It can be applicable to measure the performances, to measure how to control and compute interactions. Okay. So, the last one that we propose to discuss is the process model. So, what is this process model? Here we are finding a systematic arrangement of processes or systematic identification of processes through which the public policy are formulated, right. So, in week 1 we have already discussed that what are the attributes of a good policy making process. Okay. So, we are just, instead of explaining it in a great detail, since we have already taken a lecture on it, so we will be just highlighting what is this process model. So, here we are finding definite steps or processes, that identification of a particular problem or demand for the government action, where the issues are there, issues are identified and there is a demand for the intervention of the government. And once that is done, then there should be the policy proposals, okay, policy proposals to be formulated, and this policy proposal, out of the policy proposals, at least one is selected, okay, and then the proposal gets legitimations by selection and enactment of policies. So, this is how we have already discussed the journey of the bills, okay, bills to acts. So, bills means your proposals, to acts means your, when it gets legitimized, okay. And when legitimation is done, then next process is evaluation of policies, okay. And these are some of the processes that we use for public policy, and you can refer to the materials like for system model Easton's 1957. Here you can find the details, and the textbook that I used to refer is Understanding of Public Policy by Thomas R. Dye. Okay, thank you.